Okay, so the live stream between Sargon and Andrew Anglin is finally over, and if you weren't one of the 8,000 people who were watching, and if you're not interested in sitting through 3.5, 4 hours of at times interminable discussion and nonsense, I'm going to try to break down a few of the points for you that I got from listening to 2.5 or 3 hours of this mess. So I was on Gab trying to give a play-by-play of the most interesting points, which in my opinion is the main takeaway from here is the intellectual bankruptcy and intellectual dishonesty and bad faith of people who find themselves in the position of defending Western liberalism as it's run by this corrupt anti-white oligarchy that we have right now. So I'm going to give you a few of these things. Basically, I guess Sargon had serious problems with saying that he wants a border wall. He wants to have zero immigration, but if you are doing it for the purposes of trying to keep white people as a majority in white countries, then he opposes whatever you're going to do. Andrew Anglin's basic position was, well, first his position was that he was going to make life difficult for illegal immigrants and for recent immigrants, for people who don't yet have citizenship but could potentially end up in this country forever and change the demographic balance of the United States. So Anglin said that he wanted to do, I think, what a lot of Republicans and people on the right want to do, which is make it more difficult for businesses to hire Hispanics and make life tougher for the Hispanics who are here illegally, and with the expectation that those people will self-deport, and that if they don't self-deport, then you go in by force and deport them. And that you do this not just with Hispanics, but with basically all of the people who are non-white, non-European, and don't have any kind of cultural overlap that would lead us to believe that they're going to be able to assimilate. One of the examples that was repeatedly used was Somalis. So these are people who quite often live in ethnic enclaves, don't have the religion, don't have the democratic values, and potentially, if you believe in race realism, that could have biological or IQ-related reasons for not being able to be assimilated into the American population. So people like that, Anglin says, are going to have to go as well. Sargon of Akkad objected to this because he said the state would have to use violence and it would have to come over the rights of individuals, and we just can't have that. Now, later on, and throughout the course of this, Sargon said that sometimes we're going to have to break the rights of individuals in order to protect the society. So it's really a confused mess for the most part. Basically, it all just revolves around him defending the status quo. Let's look at a few of these quotes here. Somebody said correctly that Sargon was more concerned with hypothetical violence against non-whites in the future that might result from Anglin's policies than from anything that was actually being done to whites right now, and I think that's probably true. Basically, all of Sargon's policy objectives to the policies that Anglin or anybody else in there would be promoting would say, but you're going to lead to totalitarianism, you're going to lead to authoritarianism. Some of these non-whites are going to be hurt or injured, or white people are going to be injured. So it's all hypothetical disadvantages to the policy prescriptions that are actually intended to deal with stuff that's happening right now today. So that's probably not a good way to argue. Sargon said that groups of people don't have rights, only individuals have rights. No one has ever believed this on planet Earth. No one has ever believed that ethnic groups constituted as such, or that religious groups constituted as such, are not entitled to some special protections to preserve their special character. If you go look at a country like Lebanon that has a confessional system, the institutions of the country are actually set up to make sure that they're kept separate, that they all have some kind of political influence, and that they are preserved as unique things. So for this guy to come along and say that groups don't have rights, he's basically just arguing outside of the practical experience of, I would say, probably most people on planet Earth. It's actually kind of like a revolutionary and radical doctrine to say that we're going to ignore the religion, the color, the historical background of all of the people in a society, and that the only thing that we're going to take as valuable are the traits of the individuals themselves, rather than their place within a larger group. Hope that makes sense. The white birth rate was an issue that came up. Andrew Anglin basically said that the declining white birth rate and the failure of whites to reproduce themselves in sufficient numbers to maintain their dominance in white countries, their demographic dominance in white countries, was a problem, and that it's something that can be fixed and should be fixed. Sargon of Akkad said that this was the result of natural economic development. When people get more money, they have fewer children. What he doesn't want to understand, or doesn't understand, is that all economic development is basically the result of government activities. You can have a policy that says we're going to have a complete free market and all the natural resources are up for grabs, or you can have an economic system in which the state owns or controls some strategic industries. Like you can nationalize the oil field, for example. And depending on which one of those you do, it's going to have demographic implications. So you can't really have some kind of natural state in which things are just, well, of course that's what's happening because that's just nature. It doesn't work like that. We've got alternatives over policy choices. And you have to have an argument about which kind of policy choices you want to support and which kind of policy choices that you don't want to support. And they've all got outcomes. And what Anglin is saying is that he wants to support a specific kind of policies that will lead to an increase in a white birth rate in white countries. It's not that hard to understand. Some good quotes from Sargon is saying stuff like, any immigration is too much. He didn't want Germans or Poles coming to the country. So it's kind of weird. So Sargon is okay with all of the Caribbean blacks and all of the Indians and Pakistanis and all these people who are in Britain. Is okay with them, wants them to stay there, thinks that he can assimilate them, thinks that he can bring them on board with his ideological viewpoint. Even we're talking about like the Muslim rape gangs, for example, right? So people whose worldview is fundamentally opposed to the Western system. He wants to keep those people in the country and try to change them, but he doesn't want to take in any Germans or Poles who are probably actually ideologically already closer to him. Just doesn't add up, doesn't make any sense to me. Sargon had a really strange argument about British imperialism. He was saying that was probably one of the greatest things that had ever happened for the world, presumably because the British propagated technological and cultural advancements that other people are now taking advantage of. Keep in mind that most of that was done by force, right? The people who were having this technology shoved onto them didn't have a whole lot of choice about it. And if they, tried to reject it or, maintain their sovereignty or whatever, well, then, there was a British military to back it up. But Sargon has already said that we can't even do basic policy changes like expelling people who will never be assimilable into Western societies because that would involve violence. So his worldview and the value of British imperialism really doesn't add up. It was good even though it did a lot of violence, and we can't do good things because they might cause violence. I don't get it. The craziest thing of all, the craziest thing that occurred in the entire deal was at the end when they said, well, Sargon, what are you going to do? What's your idea? How are you going to defeat the social justice warriors? As if the social justice warriors were even the problem. That's not the problem. The problem is that our political leaders are traitors and are actively destroying all of us and selling us out. The social justice warrior stuff is being promoted by our government officials. It's an emanation of the problem rather than the problem itself. But he says he's got a secret plan that he can't tell anyone about, and that it's going to take a decade or decades before it's finally effective. And no, he can't tell you the basic plan, and he can't tell you any details of it. You've just got to sit back and wait and see and watch his videos meanwhile in the meantime, or else he's not going to take you seriously and talk to you. So it's really bizarre. I think this kind of all points to the basic problem with this guy, and probably with anybody who's on the side of this guy. They are promoting a critical method, an analytical method that is devoid of content. They really don't have an ideological viewpoint, and it's revealed by some of the stuff I just said, right? So, like, the government can't do any policies that might result in violence. Oh, but by the way, the government has to keep Sharia law out of the UK even if violence is necessary. So he ideologically he's all over the place, because there's not a firm, there's not some like basic foundational assumptions there that a political theory rises out of. And the result is that he can criticize an argument that you would make, but then when you ask him what he's going to substitute, if my argument isn't good enough, then what are we going to do, Sargon? Status quo. Status quo, that's it. Minimal, tiny changes to the status quo, and that's it. And he says he doesn't want immigration, but if you're going to support the status quo, how are you possibly going to reduce immigration into Britain or any other country? It's a completely ridiculous idea. So I hope that here in 12 minutes that I was able to sum up kind of what I thought went on there. And of course, there was a whole nother 2 hours just of people, yelling over each other and all this kind of stuff. If you're really interested in it, you can go watch it. But if I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't. Thank you for your time.